Blog Talk Radio.
You are listening to Night and Day, the Thom Jennings audio archive.
Hello and welcome to the second installment of Night and Day. This is Thom Jennings from the Niagara Gazette. And if you were able to hear the first episode with Chris Squire, I hope you enjoyed it. This second interview that I'm putting up is an interview that I did with Three Dog Night founder Cory Wells. Cory Wells was a Buffalo native. He passed away in 2015. This interview, I hadn't heard it in a long time. It was conducted back in 2010. And Cory really talks about some incredible stuff. He mentions people like Elton John and Cher and all kinds of other people, and even delves into the origins of the name Three Dog Night, which is it's fairly well known amongst the fans, but maybe some people don't know it. So it's an interesting story in and of itself. Anyhow, hope you enjoy this one. Hope you enjoyed the last one. And right now, without any further ado, here is my interview with Three Dog Night's Cory Wells.
It is. How are you?
I'm great, man. What an honor to speak with you. You are certainly rock royalty in the Buffalo, New York area.
Oh. And you're a great news announcer. Oh, that's a different Thom, right?
Yeah, well, that was Peter Jennings, actually. Okay. First question, and I'll ask some local questions as well, but the origin of the name Three Dog Night, I think it's kind of a fascinating story. I wanted to hear it from your perspective.
Well, the historical meaning is that it's an Aborigines slang word, I think, from Australians. The Aborigines slept with animals. They were kind of nomads. They traveled from place to place, and so they would take a dog in with them at night when they went to sleep. And, of course, the Australians got a hold of that, and then they just enhanced that or embellished it by saying, a three-dog night would be a pretty cold night. And it's just kind of like we say it's hot as hell. That's basically what it meant. Anyway, and it all came from an actress by the name of June Fairchild, who was dating Danny at the time, and she had found the song in a magazine called Mankind. And we were playing with a lot of different names at the time, 6'3" and Tricycle and some other names. And she threw that name out. We went, that doesn't make any sense. We don't like. But eventually, the record company really wanted us to get a name because we were already halfway through the album. So they said, you got to come up with a name. So we took that name. And
now you originally were in Buffalo, New York, and then moved out to Los Angeles.
Correct.
To form Three Dog Night. So, but you did play in the Buffalo area for some time before you went out to Los Angeles?
Well, I had a lot of garage bands then, and I worked with a lot of different school chums that were. Victor Kubiak was the name of a guy who I started singing with, and he was legitimate because he actually took guitar lessons. And so whatever he learned at the guitar lesson that day, he would show me at the house, and then we sort of kind of had a duet, Everly Brothers kind of thing, and we worked on that. And then another fellow who I worked with, who actually went with me to California, Mike Luston, and we ended up played in a garage band with him for a long time, and nothing really materialized. It was just kid stuff, and his father owned a tavern at the time, so we'd play on a Friday night in there, and that was a big deal, and that it sort of evolved from that. And then I actually, at 18 or 17, I joined the Air Force, and I was gone for a while, and then I came back. Actually, while I was in the Air Force, I formed a vocal group. Because prior to that, let me back up here a little bit. While I was in the Buffalo area, I started forming doo-wop groups, and the best people that did that were the African Americans. And so I would go down to their neighborhood, and I actually worked at Sattler's department store in the restaurant as a busboy, and those guys worked with me side by side, or I worked with them, either way. and we formed this vocal group, and we actually played sang at one of the parties that they held for the department store. I don't know, they used to do that, I guess, in those days, and we sang, and I remember that was the most scariest thing ever in my life. My legs were shaking, my voice was dry, and I couldn't hardly. Anyway, it started to get the idea going, and then we expanded that, and I started singing around the area, and we actually worked in some of the clubs that were in the black neighborhood and that kind of stuff. I took my life into my hands, but at the time I thought, and I was always told these terrible stories, but in essence it really wasn't true. They were great people. They were real nice, and then I joined the Air Force, and then I formed a group in the Air Force, and that group pole vaulted itself back almost all the way into the best in the Air Force and came in third in the Armed Forces. So when I came back, they made me a head of an airman's club and took me out of my other career, which was on the flight line, and said, you know, you're destined for show business. So I learned actually the business by being in an air club in the Air Force, how to book acts and how you go about all that and stuff, and started learning the business from the inside out. It was very informative.
What was the name of that department store again?
Sattlers department store on Broadway on the east side.
So really the foundation for your musical career was sort of started here, but not the professional aspect of it sort of formed and molded during your Air Force years?
It kind of, yeah, it was the honing your skills kind of thing, and at least giving you directions and so forth and so on. And I was very, very influenced by R&B music back then, and so forth. So when I joined the Air Force, I continued that on with that vocal group. When I got out of the Air Force and came back home, I actually started working and making money at it, and I joined a group called the Vibratos then. And the guitar player that I had, childhood friend of mine I had garage bands with, was in that band also. So we worked with him for a while, and the band leader was an Italian guy, and he didn't like the fact that I was an Italian, so he changed my name to Bobby DeVario, which didn't set where I would be anyway. So Mike and I decided we were going to leave that band, and we went and started the new Vibratos. And then I worked lots of clubs in the Buffalo area. Well, I say it's lots of clubs, but I worked the most time we put into a club was a place called Lulabelle's, and that was like a college hangout. We had packed. There was a band around at the time called the Ravens. There was a band around called Hermie the Spermie at the time, and Hermie worked the Lulabelle's also, and it was like a college hangout and a lot of beer slinging, slopping, and all that kind of stuff. And then I worked the Town Casino, and then I worked Glen Casino, and there was, I'm trying to think of this other place that we worked also. Jan's, I guess it was called Jan's. So, and I started to do that. And it was at Lulabelle's that the brother-in-law of the guitar player came in, and he was an actor who had come back from California, and he was going back there again, and he wanted to take me with him because he thought that I had potential. Of course, the guys in the band said, "No way, we're going with you." So we had this little caravan that went with us.
So how long before you hooked up with Three Dog Night or got that opportunity to record with the other guys?
Well, we left in '65, I believe, and I didn't get to start forming Three Dog Night until the latter part of '69 or the middle of '69. But during that period of time, I had made some inroads in, or we did. The Enemies was the name of the band, and we made some inroads in Hollywood. When we first got there, really that this actor who brought us from Buffalo had this job lined up at a place called Panza's Lazy Susan, which turned out to be, once we get to L.A., find out it's just a piano bar. The guys never had a band in there. So we're kind of stranded. So the drummer, whose name was Dave Trieger from Buffalo, he and I went out to a bar called the Ragdoll, and we asked did they have bands there. The guy said yes, and we wondered when did they have auditions. He said anytime. We came back, we auditioned. We said what do you think? He said, you guys are great. You got the job. We said, when do we start? He says, you start tonight. And threw the other band out, and we started, and we stayed there for 6 months.
Wow.
Playing in that club. And that started the ball rolling. People started coming in to see us. We had lines around the block. And then all of a sudden we got this offer to go to Ciro's. And these were all stepping stones in Hollywood. Ciro's was the main place on the Sunset Strip, not the Ciro's in Buffalo. And it was like the stepping stones for us to start working in some of the higher up clubs. And it took us 4 years to do this thing. And then by that time we started I started a whole different image, and where we grew our hair down, and we started doing British songs and doing the British Invasion time, Beatles and Rolling Stones and Animals and all that kind of stuff. And it worked my way to the point where we started working the Whiskey A Go-Go. And the Whiskey A Go-Go at that time was exclusive club, and they would lease out for parties, but for the movie stars. So there was one party we did there for Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton, Elizabeth Taylor, and all the stars in the world were there, Ben Gazzara and Jonathan Winters and Connie Stevens and Cher. And Cher had seen me sing. She approached me and asked me, would we like to go on their tour? And, of course, we said yes. And when we went on that tour, Danny, my partner now in Three Dog Night, had regional hits then, and it got me to meet him and talk to him, and we started swapping notes and so forth and so on, and we started bonding there, and that was the start of my relationship with Danny.
And the rest is history, as they say.
the rest is history, right.
Now, you guys have had some of the biggest hits, probably one of the biggest acts in the history of music. How did you decide what material you were going to record? I mean, you had some of the best writers in the business.
Well, they weren't then. They were unknown then. Nobody even heard of Elton John. Nobody even knew who Elton John was. He was a starving musician in England. And he sent us a song called Lady Samantha. We really liked it. We could hear the potential in it. We were our own A&R guys. We did our own. No one picked our songs. We did everything by ourselves. We had good ears, as they used to say in the business. So when we got this song, Lady Samantha, of course, we put it on the second album that we released. And that album, first of all, the first album, we had rehearsed all those songs for about 6 months. So we knew them inside and out, and it was hard to get jobs because some of these guys had day gigs and so forth and so on. But we ended up playing after hours, which was from 2 o'clock in the morning until 7 o'clock in the morning. And that was the only time we could actually get to play and do this stuff. And we actually had done. So when we went into the studio, we recorded that first album in 2 days. Did 6 one day and 6 the next, and it just was like an assembly line. We did blah, 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 we just went through these things. I sang Try a Little Tenderness live with the band, with everybody around me, no isolation booths, no nothing. It was just, so when they screwed up, I had to start all over again, and that was a tough song for me, but I was young and I could do that. Anyway, so when we went to the second album, it was more of a production. We got this Lady Samantha, we recorded it. Of course, the albums sold millions, and so that put cash into Elton John's pocket. He was about ready to quit the business. He was ready to get a regular job, and it continued him on. So when we went to England to perform there, he approached us, came to us, and had another song that he wanted to give us, and he was so ecstatic that we had recorded this Lady Samantha. He thought we would do a good job on this next song. We said, thank you. We took the song. We took it back to L.A. We actually recorded it, and it was ready to go on the album and so forth and so on. And we found out he released it, and he had a hit, and the song was called Your Song.
Right. Well, his version wasn't a hit. I mean, you guys both recorded around the same time, but I don't think that song really took off till years later, did it?
No, I think it became a hit. We just said, okay, we'll forget about that as being a single, so we'll just put it on the album, and I mean, to just put it as one of the album cuts, and that was it. So, you know, that right there, and Danny's got a letter from Elton that where he explains, "Thank you very much for doing the song. Appreciate it, and you guys did help me out." Blah blah blah. Of course, Elton never says that in public. He never ever gave us credit for it. But anyway, so it was a lot of singers that no one heard of. Hoyt Axton, no one ever heard of Hoyt. Hoyt was trying to. The only thing that Hoyt's legacy was that his mother, Mae Axton, wrote "Heartbreak Hotel" for Elvis Presley, and I think he had "Greenback Dollar." I think was a song that he had released, or something Cadillac, Pink Cadillac, or something like that. But and he had written this television special for the only 3 networks that were then, ABC, NBC, and so forth, so on CBS, and they turned it down. So he started dividing up the songs from that television special, and that's where "Joy of the World" came from. It was from that special. Laura Nero, I found the song for Chuck called "Sunlight," and then he found that song for me, Eli. So in all these writers, I think Paul Williams was on the verge of having a hit with the Carpenters. It's Only Just Begun, which Elton John actually had that song with a commercial insurance company, which I think had John Travolta in it, his very first commercial he did for an insurance company thing. So the songwriters were basically unknown, and even Nielsen was, had an album out, but no one was really recognizing. All this stuff happened after.
Right, and you did a Randy Newman song as well before you.
Randy Newman. No one even knew who Randy Newman was. I found Randy Newman's album, his first release, in a Sears bargain bin for 50 cents. I happened to be at Sears at the time, saw the album, looked interesting. I said, "Boy, this guy looks strange. He didn't have Beatle hair. He didn't have long hair." And so I took it and I brought the album back home and I played it. I was just blown away by the music and his writing. And so we started doing "Mama Told Me Not to Come" from that.
Yeah, you guys must have had an ear. I mean, that's literally a who's list of writers, and they're even still pumping out songs that are popular.
Yeah. Randy's still working at it.
Now, just because you probably only have a few minutes left, but back to kind of the Buffalo connection as well.
Uh-huh.
What was it like the first time you came back into town? I mean, it sounds like you performed under a few different stage names. So when you came back, did anyone even really know who you were or that you were from the area?
Right. Well, there's a misconception that everybody thought my name is Lewandowski, and actually, in reality, that is not my last name. And I never disputed that because my mother was still alive, and I'm a love child. So my father, whose name is not Wells, but it's very close to it, I use part of it, was a gentleman from England who lived in Canada, who came here, saw my mother, bing bang, whatever happened, and I was born. And so Lewandowski is my mother's maiden name, and if you see my birth certificate, there is no father's name on it. It's just my mother's last name, and so she gave me her maiden name, and that's how that happened. And then I went under another name of Kosmowski, which was my stepfather, who my mother remarried, and he never really legitimately adopted me. So, and I used that name through school and stuff, but again, it wasn't really my real last name, and my last name was close to Wells. And I'm saying that because I don't know if there's anybody that's still, I'm sure there is, that's connected to my father, and I don't want to cause problems for them. Anyway, that's basically it.
So when you came back to Buffalo for a homecoming, do you still have family connections and everything in the area?
Oh yeah. I have sisters here, I have brothers here. My mother was still here, aunts and uncles and everybody. And yeah, sure. And every time we came back, or I came back, they would come to the show, or I've got nephews and nieces and all them, so that they show up also. It was always good. I always loved the area. My heartstrings are still here, and they continue to be. Matter of fact, I have a summer home there, so I come out in the summer and there now.
Oh, great. Well, I didn't realize it. So you'll be close by for the show in Lockport then.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it. As I said, I'm a huge fan. I can't wait for the show. You guys have always sounded great, and some of my favorite songs. Try a Little Tenderness. I still can't believe you did that in a studio in one day. I mean,
yeah. Well, I mean, and somebody didn't use their brains and say, well, go inside the isolation booth and sing it in there, because you remember now we're working with. I mean, today they have gazillion tracks that they use. I mean, I always thought, oh my God, 64-track studio, you'll never use all those. Well, they're up in the hundreds now, and it's all digital. But back in those days, we only had 8 tracks, so everything was, or 4 tracks actually. We worked on a 4-track on the very first album, and that was that. So they did a lot of what they call ping ponging. I won't go into the technical aspect of that, but that's very hard. So they figured, if they can get it all on one track, it'll be good, because then they can use the other tracks to enhance it or whatever. So I sang in there, and it went. They messed up, I don't know, maybe about 5 times. It got to a point where I just said, unless we get this, I'm going to lose my voice. And they did. Finally, we all got it.
Well, that's got to be a very. I mean, you still perform that song live?
No, not as many times as we'd like. It takes a strain. Plus, we have to add other new stuff in. We can't just keep doing the same stuff over and over. So there are new songs, and we're working on a new CD, and we're hoping that this will get done, and we're going to release this. But those songs are available on the website, threedognight.com, or Amazon, or iTunes, and there's a couple of them where the links are threedognight.com. So you can go in, you can actually download one if you're PC savvy and you know how to do that. You can download those songs for, I think, 90 cents or 95 cents or something.
Yeah, well, definitely. I mean, Try a Little Tenderness is probably in the history of recorded music. That's one of the best vocal performances ever.
Well, all that, and I did those things. You got to remember now, I did that as a tribute to I did 2 songs as a tribute to 2 black artists that I thought were phenomenal, and they had died, and it was like a footnote somewhere, and like nobody even, he died, boom, and that's the end of it, and there was never any announcement about them, or there was a small blurb with Otis Redding, he died, and I went to see him when I worked in San Jose in my other band then, and saw him at the Basin Street West, and he was phenomenal. And the other song I did was as a tribute to Sam Cooke, A Change Is Gonna Come. He passed away, and nobody really knew about it. So that's what those were. They were tribute songs to them, to those 2 artists, and it just so happened that Try a Little Tenderness got, I guess, the top 20 or something in the country at the time. But
yeah, and it seems like after they passed away, that's when people really started to appreciate those guys.
Right, exactly. Isn't that a shame?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, fantastic. I really appreciate that a lot, and I'll look forward to meeting you at the Lockport show. And
okay, Tom.
Thank you so much.
Now, this is the same thing as the canal thing that they had in Tonawanda, or is it Chickawaga?
Yeah, it's actually the same series. They just moved it. So North Tonawanda, I know you guys played there. That was kind of it's right along the side of the canal. It was a little bit cramped, but this is a nice wide open courtyard.
That's an understatement. Actually, we had broke Chicago's record. Chicago had 27,000 people showed up there. We had 33,000.
Wow.
So we broke that record. And it was just unfair to the people, because somebody was back a mile somewhere. They couldn't even see the stage, so they could just barely hear the music. So this time, I think this is a smart thing what they've done. I think they've got it so that most people will be able to see the show and hear the show. Oh,
yeah, absolutely. It's just a nice wide open courtyard, and I was there Friday. I mean, I was at every one last year as well, and even with, you start to get 25, 30, and it starts to get a little bit cramped, but nothing like it was in North Tonawanda.
Yeah, that was insane.
It wasn't. It was a great series. They had brought some great artists, but it was just logistically. I think the series just kind of outgrew its.
Yeah, you couldn't get around actually.
Yeah. All right. Well, fantastic. Well, look forward to hearing some of the new stuff as well. When are you guys going to be performing some of the new songs?
Yeah, we're gonna do. We're going up to Aurelio, or I guess that's how you spell it, in Toronto, in Casino Rama, and I think that's coming up this weekend. And so we've got a couple of days there. So we're gonna see if we can work a couple of other songs, because there's another great song that we've got called "Prayer for the Children" that we're doing. It's so completely opposite of one the other thing that I did called "Heart of Blues," that this thing is like. And it's the first time for, again, pushing the envelope for Three Dog Night. It's the first time ever in the history of Three Dog Night that all 6 members sing on this song, and it's done a cappella.
Wow.
So, and it's a great song, and it's actually one of my favorite songs on it. It's something that Danny brought to the table. So we got that, and we got some other songs, and we're doing songs off our albums that really didn't get the exposure, that were songs that were just album cuts that we thought were great, and have some little stories connected to it. And so it's a little rounder show, a little more rounded.
That sounds fantastic. Well, I can't wait. I know it's one of the shows that they plan on being a real big one. You know, everybody loves you guys. So.
All right.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right, Tom.
All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.